Hi everyone, welcome to this new video. This video is going to be about HTML. I'm going to explain a little bit about HTML, what defines HTML, and then I will explain some specific HTML tags, and we're going to build a small website, a small web page using HTML. So first of all, HTML, it's an abbreviation for hypertext markup language. These are words you will not hear anybody say again. Yeah, I'm not really going to explain this. What's important to remember, and you might remember it from the previous videos, is that HTML in the end is just a text file. And the thing is that people, I mean everybody on the world, but there's a specific organization which is called the W3C, I think. They agreed on a way to write HTML. So there's a certain way to write HTML. You do it in a certain format. And that's why it's called a markup language. So it's a standardized format, text format basically. So you have to keep yourself to this standard, and if you do so, then a browser is able to understand it and is able to render a web page based on this HTML you wrote. Of course, this standard is really big. There's a lot of options in HTML, and there's a lot of things which I don't even know yet. But the basis of HTML, it's quite simple. In HTML, an important part is that you use tags. And the tag you always open with this arrow to the left, then there is a certain text, and then an arrow to the right, then you have some other text, and then you close the tag again, which is then an arrow to the left, a slash, and then the same tag name. So I would like to take this apart a little bit, and maybe I can make it a realistic example by saying H1 here, and here H1, and here this is a title. You might remember this from your assignment you did to get into Hack Your Future. What we see here is an HTML tag. This is an HTML tag, and this is an HTML element. So the thing in itself is a whole HTML element, and it means it is a certain HTML tag. In this case, the tag is called H1. Then there is some content in the HTML element, and then it's a closing tag. So it closes the H1. And that is for every HTML element. You open a tag and you close it again. And there's some content. And then in an HTML tag, you can put another HTML tag. So I could say, in this H1, I can do like this, and then there's here in the whole H1 HTML element, there's another HTML element called B, which stands for bold. And in that sense, you can put elements in elements. Of course, also here there are certain rules for that. You can't put every element in every element, but more on that later. Then there's also sometimes tags which close themselves. So you also have the image tag, which is img. And this tag, it does not work like this, that you open it, then there's content, and then you close it. But an image tag, it's different, that it closes itself directly. And then here there's some information, but more about that later. So here you see an HTML element with content, and an image HTML element has no content. It closes directly itself again. But most tags work like this. Some tags work like this, but you will quickly remember which one works like this. And it's also quite logical at some point, because an image doesn't have a text content, for example. Then let's write a simple HTML structure. So as I explained in my first video, we're not going to use the file explorer. So I now type git bash. to open git bash. And then I navigate here to a certain folder to create an HTML file. So I do cd for change directory, and I go to development. This is a folder I created for myself. Then I go to the folder hack your future. And then I created a folder for class 28. And here I make a directory for HTML video. Then I go into this folder. And this folder is empty because I just created it. So to explain again, I used here mkdir to create a directory. Then I did change directory to go into this directory. And here I used ls, list files, to see if there's anything in the directory, which there is not because I just created it. Now I say code, then a space and a dot to open Visual Studio Code in this folder. So what I would like to do first is to create the most basic HTML document we can create. Basic HTML.html. So an important thing already to notice, let me just rename this to just basic. An HTML file, even though it's a text file, it doesn't have the extension txt, but we give it the extension HTML. So that this doesn't mean it's a special file. It's just so that the operating system knows, okay, this is an HTML file, so I'm going to open it in a browser. Then some basic HTML. HTML, it always starts first with an HTML tag. So you always first sort of open an HTML tag, and all the HTML goes into this HTML tag element. So we first have HTML, then we start with a head, and we have a body. These are also two very important tags, elements. The body element is where the content of your website comes. So everything inside the body element, it will be visible on the web page, and it will be shown there. Things you write here in the head element, they won't be shown to the person looking at the web page. They are just extra information for the browser to understand what this web page is about, or to show an icon in the top or a title in the tab of the browser. So there's a lot of meta information here, but it's not shown on the web page itself. And for example, one of these meta information you put here is a title. So I can say here, let's say a news website. Then in the body, you enter the content of the website, and let's for now just put an H1. And I think I didn't explain it before. An H1, it means that it's the title, that it's also a title, but it's a text element, which is a title. Let's make up a nice title. New York Times. So this is already a bit confusing, but this title, it's the title which appears in the browser title bar, and this title will be rendered on the page. And it's called an H1 because it's the most important title, but more about that later as well. So here we already have the most basic HTML you can get, and I can now open this in the browser. You will see that it renders this website. I would hardly call this a website. It just has a title. But what we already see here is that there's here the title, New York Times, which is the H1 element. And in the tab of the browser, we see news website. And that's the title which is in the head element. So this is not shown on the page. And I could now, for example, add here a p tag. And I could say the latest news. If I save that and then I go back to the browser and I refresh, then it shows also this text in the content of the website. I just dragged this to my browser to open it, but what you can do if you want to open this file, I think you can say reveal in File Explorer, and then you can just double click the file to open it in your browser. And now it's gonna start Firefox, which I wanted to prevent. Okay, but then it opens in the browser. So this is already the most basic HTML you can get, and which are, if I remove these two lines, these tags are always mandatory to have on your website. So remember them well. Then I also want to show you a trick which I often use. If you have if you open Visual Studio Code and you have an empty HTML file, you can also write HTML, and then Visual Studio Code gives you some suggestions to automatically generate this default HTML. If you then click on HTML5 or HTML, okay, when you click HTML, it just does the HTML tag. If you click on HTML5, it will automatically create a whole default HTML document. And you see here again the HTML tag, the head tag, the body tag, the HTML tag. But there are also some extra tags which I didn't add to my HTML document. For example, here we have the doc type. This is actually also a required HTML tag, but the browser also understands it if you don't add it. But it should be there, so don't forget this one. Then there's this meta tag, and this just says what is the character encoding. Don't remember that, it's just a technical thing which the browser needs to know. And here is a meta tag to make sure that your web page also will be nicely visible on mobile phones. You will learn more about this later, or you can read a bit about it online. And then we have the title tag, which we also added. Yeah, so that's the basic HTML structure. Then now I would like to just show some HTML tags and explain what they do. And then afterwards, using these HTML tags, we can create a simple website. So let's start with some semantic HTML tags. We, for example, have the header tag. It sounds a bit like the head tag, but it's header. And header is what we call on a website, we call it the top part of a website. So if I go to, for example, this Dutch news website, then often, or almost every website, in the top or in the left, it has this menu bar, or sometimes also a logo or or an image or something. This part is what's called the header of the website. So in HTML, there's then also a tag which you can use to define that something is the header. And then the browser, but also other, for example, Google, when Google visits your website to see what's on the web page, it will use this tag to see, okay, this is the header, then I know that I will find the menu there, and I will find something else there, etc. Then often in the header we have a menu, and for that we use the HTML element nav. But then this element, it doesn't do anything in itself. It just defines, here you can find the navigation of the website, the menu. We still have to create this menu ourselves. And for that we could, for example, you just add a link. And a link, for a link we use the A tag. So I can say here, I make a link to google.com because we're only creating one web page, so I can't link to another web page. But I can also make a link to the home page. I just put, or let's say we do also want to Facebook. Or nu.nl maybe. But normally, sorry, this is maybe not the best example because normally you don't link to other websites in your menu. So let's make it a bit more realistic. Normally you would do here /about, and then you have a link to your about page, or you would have here contact, and this would go to your contact page. Maybe we can fill them in later to show how we can actually make a functioning menu. But if I save this and I look at it in the browser, we now have a small menu which is just 2 links. So then there's also a tag to define that this is the main part of your website, of the web page. This is called main. Then we also have one for the footer, and the footer is always at the bottom of a web page. Then, for example, in the main part of this web page, if we want to make a news article, for example, we could say we first have an image. That we use the image tag. And an image tag, as I said before, it's one which closes itself directly. So it does not have an opening and a closing tag. It just is an opening tag which then automatically straight away closes itself. And then if you want to say which image will be there, we use the source attribute. So actually this is something I didn't explain yet. Some HTML elements, they have attributes. You also see it here in the link tag. It has the attribute called href. And an attribute, it's always the name of the attribute, then an equal sign, and then the value of the attribute. So for the link, it says, where does this link go to? What should it open if you click on the link? For an image, you say the source of the image. So I could here say header.jpg. And then it will try to render this image here, which I don't have yet, but I will add it later. So we can have an image, then we have a title. The H1, it's the most important title on the web page. Or let's make up a news article. What's a good news article about Hack Your Future? Hack Your Future. Graduated 1,000th student. And then what would we overlap next to an H1? We also have an H2. And then there's also an H3. And an H4, and an H5, and an H6. And what this means is that depending on the higher the number gets, the less relevant the title is. So the H1 is the most important title, and there's only one H1. There should only be one H1 on the web page. Then we have the H2, and there can be multiple H2s. And then also multiple H3s and multiple H4s, but depending on how important this title is, you use a different tag. So normally if you would write a document, or Word document for example, you use like a really big main title, then for a sub part you use a bit of a smaller title, and if you in that part you also have a subtitle, it's a bit smaller again. That's a bit how you should use the H1, the H2 and the H3, and the H4 and the 5 and the H6. Just depending on how important the title is and in how deep it is into the content of your web page. Based on that you use a different H tag, a different number. So for now we can, for example, we have an H1 and then Often in a news article, we first have a paragraph. I'm not sure if I write this correctly. We have a paragraph which, for example, explains the first. It's a short summary of the news article. So we can say the fast-growing teaching program Hack Your Future graduated its thousands students last Sunday. And then often this first paragraph of a news website, it's in bold. So we can use here the B tag to make it bold. And then it could be that we have an H2, because we're going to add another title to introduce what is Hack Your Future actually. And then there's another paragraph, and then we just add some nonsense text there, because I'm not going to write a whole news article. So I'm going to zoom a bit out. I hope it's still readable. So now we have a header part where we have a menu, then we have a main part where the news article is described. We have an image, a title, a summary, paragraph with bold text, then a second subtitle with another paragraph with text, and then here we have the empty footer still. So let's also add something in the footer, and in the footer we will say this news website is brought to you by Arco. And now I write here the text without the P tag, and I shouldn't do that, so I should always add at least a paragraph tag or some other tag around it. So the footer, the bottom part of the website. And there is a paragraph again. So if you now watch this, I saved it and I refresh the browser, and we will see indeed the content which I typed in the HTML document. But you might also see that this is not very clear. The menu, it's very ugly. Okay, the image doesn't load, so maybe we can add a cool image. Let's see, I like this image. This is very nice to use for the news article, with Wouter there in the center clapping. So I go to where I made this is where I made the web page, and I call it header.jpg. Because in my HTML I said image source header.jpg. And now I went to Chrome and I did the right mouse button click to save the image as. And then I saved it in the same folder and I called it header.jpg. So it's the same as what's here. And if I now refresh the document, it shows the image. But as you see, it's very big. For that, I can then actually use an attribute. And I can say, I think if I want it to be 300 pixels wide, I can say 300. This is a bit small, so let's make it 500. So I use here the attribute width. And as value I use 500, then it becomes 500 pixels wide. Still, this is not a very clear news website. I mean, there's this small links here, which then is the menu, and this text is really wide, and then there's this footer, which seems to belong to the article itself. It's not very clear. So to make it nicer, we use CSS. We can make it look like this news article, for example. That the menu looks nice here in the top, and let's see if it will load with all those ads. And we can also put the title on the image, and that the text is not so super wide the whole screen, but it is just only so many pixels wide that it's easier to read, and that the text is a bit bigger. All of that we do with CSS. With HTML, we just set up the structure of the web page, as you see here. And to make it nice, we use CSS. And what's really important or at least it will help you a lot if you write HTML, to use this indenting, as it's called. So for the header, for the body, it's all the way to the left, and the header, I use 4 spaces or 1 tab. I press the tab button to put it a bit to the right, because the header, it's inside the body. And then to show that the navigation is inside the header, I put it a bit to the right again. And the A tag, it's in the navigation, it's also a bit to the right. But then the main tag is after the header, so it's on the same level as the header. And in that sense, it becomes more clear what the structure of your web page is, and it's easier to find elements in your structure. And it's also, what really helps is to install the extension in Visual Studio Code. I think this is also in the reading material, but there's this extension called Prettier. If you install this extension, you can just go to this icon in Visual Studio Code, then search for Prettier, and then it should show up, and you can click install. I already have it installed, so you don't see install from there. And then it should, if you save the file, it should automatically format the document so that it gets this indenting. So that's a basic HTML website with a news website. I would recommend you, I forgot it actually to do it during the video, but take some time to try to pause the video sometimes, go back and pause it sometimes to try to rebuild this web page yourself, just to see if everything is clear. And it's also the easiest way to remember all the tags and all the ways to write it. If you just do it, it's easier to remember than just watching a video. So I would recommend you to take a moment to do that after you finish this video. Then thanks a lot for watching, and if there are any questions, leave them on Slack or on the comments of this video. I would be happy to answer them.